All right, Jeff, we see this chart almost weekly from you, whether at the Monday morning macro meeting or the survival guide, the valuation composite. Can you just walk us through all these numbers? There's a lot of them to see.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about what this means, right? This is what's known as contextualized valuation, and it really comes from the idea, which is correct, that every industry group responds differently to different valuation techniques. So whether you use a free cash flow yield to enterprise value, or a price to book, or maybe even a relative book value versus the market, all industries tend to have a varied technique that works best in terms of predicting forward returns. And so we put the burden on our shoulders to really go through and sort out which ones end up being the best ones, or the best combination of valuation factors for every industry group. And then what we do is we put those together in this schemata, where we can see where the cheapest and the most expensive names or industries are based on their specific valuation work. So as an example, cap goods is going to be a different valuation technique than, say, healthcare equipment and services, but we can combine those to get a sense as to what the likelihood of forward returns are given those valuation techniques. So this number here, which is the number of outperformance or underperformance that we should expect if the last 40 years of this data holds true for the next 12 months. Now, that's something that you can probably drive a truck through, but it gives you a sense as to where we are within the historical context of the valuation versus its out or underperformance for the market. Now, that's not beta adjusted. So you're going to have some industry groups like software, as an example, or even semiconductors that are going to have a lot more variability, a lot more beta, and that those numbers might reflect themselves in this ranking. The way that we get around that is we look at this number in parentheses, and for energy today, that's 90%. What that means is that the valuation technique for energy is in the 90th percentile of cheapness that we've seen historically. So even though you might not see something like REITs as an example that really jumps out as being cheap versus the market, it's a relatively low beta group. And right now, those valuation techniques say that it is in the 96th percentile of cheapness. So in other words, only 4% of the time has it been cheaper, even though that's not reflected so much in the non-beta adjusted outperformance or underperformance from the bar. Now, the other thing that we do that you'll notice here is we will rank this by color, based on the strength of the underlying trend. And so for us, it's very, very important that you have both of these factors working in your favor. Valuation without trend is a value trap in both the short side for things that are very expensive and the long side for things that are very cheap. So what we want to do is, at a minimum, marry high value or obviously cheap names or cheap sectors with green or uptrends, or at least at a minimum, something that's more neutral, which would be gray. But that's how we put these together, both the history of the value versus itself, which is in parentheses. So how cheap is it today versus its own history over the last 40 years, and then what we would expect versus the market, given the history of where we are today.
So the 18% on software services, it's been
more expensive only 18% of the time. It's been cheaper 82% of the time.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.